to my familia homeschool. My name is Marissa and I live in Miami, Florida with my husband William, my two daughters Abby, Ellie, and another little one that's on the way. And we are a family that has chosen homeschool as the way that we have decided to educate our children. On this channel, I love talking about ideas and resources and really anything homeschool related. So if that is something that interests you, if that is something that you think could be helpful for you, for your family, I'd love for you to subscribe and join us on this journey of homeschooling. Today we're going to talk about a topic, a question that us homeschool moms don't really like. We don't really like hearing this question about homeschooling. And the question is, drum roll, are homeschooled kids socially awkward? Now, I think we are really quick to brush this off as a no, we're not socially awkward. But it's something that most people that don't homeschool think. It is an idea that most people have about homeschoolers. It's an idea that I even had about homeschoolers when I was younger. I talk in one of my first videos where I talk about our homeschool story and why we decided to homeschool, about my first contact with homeschoolers when I was younger. My thoughts about them were, they were kind of weird. So it's not an uncommon idea. And I think there's reason behind it. I mean, oftentimes when you see homeschoolers on TV or in movies, they're probably pretty awkward. I also think that maybe previously, years ago, there wasn't as many opportunities for homeschoolers to get together and spend time together and create those relationships. It was a little harder for homeschool families. There were also a lot less homeschool families, so it was harder to make those connections. But I also think that just like there's socially awkward kids in public school, in private school, there's socially awkward kids within homeschool. So I don't think it's something that we can just brush off and say, no, they're not socially awkward. We do have to be intentional, but as homeschool families, what we have is time. We have time to invest in relationships. We have time to make those long-lasting connections. Most people that have this idea about homeschoolers not being socialized or not being involved in socialization, it's due to their idea of socialization being formed by the public school system or just the school system in general. Private schools pretty similar as well, but the idea that socialization comes from sitting for 8 hours in a classroom in a desk with 20, 30 or more kids your own age. But what we don't think about is most of that time, kids are told to be quiet, to sit, to be still, to focus on their work for 8 hours at a time. And they have 30 minutes of lunch, 30 minutes of recess to do some socialization, but it's about an hour during the day that they really do socialize. As homeschoolers, we're able to get our schoolwork done in a lot less than those 8 hours, maybe like 2-3 hours if we have bigger kids. With our little kids, it's even less than that. And so we have a lot of time left over to invest in relationships, but I don't think it's something that we can just let happen on its own. We have to be intentional about it. Just like we're intentional about teaching our kids math, teaching them to add, to subtract, to do multiplication and division, just like we're intentional about teaching our kids to read and to write. Socialization is an ability that they need to learn, just like those academic skills. Socialization, or knowing how to interact with other people, is something important that they're going to need throughout their lives. So we do need to be intentional. We do need to take the time, just like we take the time to work on math, just like we take the time to work on language arts, we need to take the time to help our kids to learn these very important skills. So today I want to talk about some ideas that I've come up with that are really great ways to get our kids socializing, to get our kids interacting with others around them. One great thing about homeschool is we don't have to just interact with kids our own age. Our kids don't have to interact with kids their own age. It's great for them to learn how to interact with kids that are younger than them, with kids that are older than them. And so here's a couple ideas that I've come up with. The first idea is one of my favorites. It's where I learned the most about homeschooling, is a homeschool co-op. If you don't know, homeschool co-ops are groups of homeschoolers that come together on a pretty constant basis. So it could be once a week, it could be once a month, it could be once every other week, it could be twice a week. But they come together on a routine basis to do things together. There's some groups that are more laid back to where they may just go and have a park day together. There are other groups that are a little more structured, so they might all go to a specific place together one day out of the week and do classes together. It's a great way to get together with other families. It helps us to create that routine to where we have a set apart time to socialize, to spend time, to interact with other families once a week. We know it's gonna happen. Sometimes when we get going through our week, we forget about some of these activities, some of these things that we should be doing, but having this routine every week activity that we do together with other families is really helpful. Another great way to get involved with the community, to get in contact and interact with our community, is volunteering. There's so many ways to volunteer. You can volunteer in an animal shelter, you can volunteer in a community kitchen, you can volunteer with your church, you can volunteer in a beach cleanup. There's so many ways, but volunteering is a great way for our kids to also learn to serve others, learn to be a part of the community, to learn to be a helpful part of the community, and also to interact with people from all over, all different kinds of ages. Finding a church home is another great way for our kids to create relationships. I know that some of my longest lasting relationships were formed in church groups, in youth group, and kids church. A lot of churches have different groups, specific groups that our kids can be a part of, where they're going to be able to see these same people week after week after week. Going to places like parks are great places for our kids to socialize, but oftentimes they're not seeing the same people week after week after week. It's a great way for them to learn how to make those new relationships, but going to a place like a church group or a co-op, they're able to make those long-lasting relationships where they're interacting with the same people, they're strengthening those relationships that they've began. Another great way to get our kids socializing is to have them be a part of a sport or a recreational group. I've heard this is a way that a lot of homeschool parents get their kids out, get their kids interacting, and one of the great things about homeschool is we have the time to invest in their interests. So if your kid's interested in art, you can find an art class. If your kid is interested in a specific sport like basketball, you can invest time in those things that they're interested in, and they're able to make relationships with other kids that have those similar interests. Like I mentioned before, parks are another great way to socialize our kids, another great way to get kids interacting with other children. If we have older kids, teenagers, a job might be a great way for them to continue to strengthen those social skills. As they begin in that world of work, they're going to start to have to use social skills that they haven't used before. Learning how to interact with a boss, learning how to interact with coworkers. It's a totally different way of interacting, a different dynamic, learning how to serve others, but it's a great thing for our kids to start learning. And my last idea is music lessons. Music lessons is another great way to get our kids out, working on a skill, investing time in a skill that's beneficial for them, and making new friends. Abby has been going to violin class for the last year and a half, and it's been a really great way for her to interact with other people, her to learn from a teacher that's not me. I think that's really important, that she learns how to learn from someone who might teach differently than I do. So I think those music classes have been a great thing for her. It's been a great way for her to develop those skills, the skills of making relationships and the skills of listening to someone that might not be mom. And finally, my last tip, my last idea is that if we want our kids to value these things, if we want our kids to understand the importance of socializing, of making relationships, we have to lead by example. With anything in our life that we want our kids to value, they have to see that we value it first. So if we want our kids to value reading, if we want them to love reading, they've got to see us read. So if we want our kids to value making relationships, socializing, interacting with others, they have to see us doing it first. I think our phones and social media have made this feel a little bit more difficult. That first conversation, that first contact, sometimes it can feel difficult to take that first step, but once we're on the other side, once we have those friendships, we have those relationships with others within our community, it's so worth it. Worth it for us, but also worth it for our kids to see the importance of that in our lives, to see that we value that, and they will follow in our steps. They will do the same as well. well. So I want to know, how do you guys do this in your family? How do you do this in your homeschool? How do you invest in relationships? How do you get your kids intentionally out of the home into different situations, interacting with others around them? I'd love to hear your ideas. Leave it in a comment below. If you liked this video, if it helps you in any way, give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you can join us next time for My Familia Homeschool.